Today on Outside the Box Reviews, we are taking a look at the NECA Frankenstein Accessory set. This was a hotly anticipated release for me. The Mummy set was pretty cool. I did have a few issues with it, but it overall was something I was excited to get, and this is honestly pretty similar. Like with that Mummy review, this is going to draw a lot of comparisons to the Diamond Select or Universal Select release, where the main accessory is something we'd gotten from them previously, that being the lab table in this case. But we also get a couple other bits, so let's go ahead and take a closer look and see what this set is all about. Similar to the Mummy set, we get a cardboard backdrop to use with this. This is a little less same, I guess, as the Mummy. Like, we actually have like a doorway over here on this panel on the left. We have some of the main machinery on the right, including this kind of thing, which is what I think I conducted the lightning bolt in the movie. You got like the tower with the Jacob's ladder there at the top. And then this last side is a little boring, just kind of more of a wall with some gauges and stuff. But overall, it is a nice little backdrop. It's short, though. Like, to bring in for a size comparison, I got this Doc Brown figure, and you really don't have a whole lot of room over top of his head, which, for some setups and some displays is probably fine. It's probably more than enough, but I don't know. To me, it feels like if you want to move the character far away from the backdrop, you just run out of room pretty quick. I had a similar complaint with that Mummy set where it just isn't tall enough, and the way they have it in the box, I feel like it could be taller. Like the other one, it is this tri-fold. There's nothing on the back. It is made of a decently thick cardstock, which is nice. So it feels like it's going to be durable enough, and because you can fold it up, it will store a little easier. I just don't know how much practical use it's really going to get for me. We also get this sheet that you saw at the beginning of the video. I don't think this works as nicely as I'd want it to. Actually, let me bring in the table again to show it off a little more. This thing is kind of a nylon stretchy material. Like, if you pick it up, you could see it does have like a lot of stretch to it, which I guess is good because it won't rip as easily, but I don't feel like it drapes quite as nicely as I'd want it to. It just looks very flat when it's over top of the figure, and that may be something that's unavoidable with just scaling fabric, but also the fact that it is, being that nylon, it's kind of glossy and super clean looking. And I almost feel like if it had been something more like a t-shirt material, it could have at least felt a little more natural in terms of what this needs to be. I could be totally wrong. I'm far from an expert on fabric, that's for sure. But I don't know. It just doesn't seem to work as well as I would have liked it to. We get a little torch accessory. It's got the fire kind of flowing off the back there. The top is kind of like a silverish. I think it's supposed to be kind of like ash or charcoal looking. We have the black wooden handle going down. Just to put it in a figure's hand, here's Doc Brown again carrying it. It works well if you're like swinging it at the monster, which is kind of how it's used in the film. It's just not a particularly natural looking torch otherwise, unless you kind of have it angled a bit down. Because the fire would be naturally pointing up. So if you have it kind of outstretched in his hand like that or something, it's a bit more natural. It's just kind of an awkward pose for the fire. Honestly, when I do any photos with this, I may end up using the torch from the American Werewolf in London set, since that is a little bit more along the lines of what I think would work for a more natural look here. My other gripe with this, and I don't mean to be so negative with this, I feel like all I'm saying is bad things about this set so far, is we don't have a figure to use this, really. In trying to find a character to wield this for this display, I've got Doc Brown, and I've got that kit bash I had in the beginning that's mostly made out of a Arkham City Hugo Strange figure. So there's really not a whole lot of like scientist-y lab coat characters we could put in here. I don't know if NECA intends to make a Dr. Frankenstein or a Fritz or anything like that, but I feel like that's kind of the component we really need to make this a little more worthwhile in the set. Otherwise, it's just kind of an accessory without a home. We also get this additional head sculpt for the Frankenstein's monster figure where his face is all bandaged up. You can see a little bit of his hair sticking out there at the top along with one of the clamps. And most of it is kind of this dirtyish bandage color. You can see the profile there has a little more of that Karloff look. The head obviously is removable because it goes on your existing figure. So you can see on the sides there's some slits down here at the bottom on either side to fit over the bolts on the lower neck segment of the figure. I said bolts, but I mean they're electrodes or whatever they are. Spin around to the back, you can see a little more of that bandage detail. Nothing too crazy going on here, but it is nice to have this option for display. For articulation here, he is much more limited You basically only can have that bottom neck joint moving now. There's really no articulation in the top because of those slits for the electrodes. But you can still turn his head a little bit side to side. You can go a little up and down with it. You can pivot side to side. It really is the turning that's most hindered here with this on. But this is a head you're going to be using primarily for him sitting on the table. So it's not as critical that he has a lot of articulation. It's more just in how the sculpt looks. And the sculpt looks pretty darn good. As for the table itself, this comes in a variety of pieces in the box when you first open it. So there is a fair bit of assembly required. I should note that there are instructions included inside the packaging. I think it's in with the backdrop that show how to assemble this. I didn't find that when I first started going through it because I wasn't opening up the backdrop right away. And I kind of started trying to put this thing together just by looking at pictures, and that was a bit of a pain in the ass. But they do have those instructions there, so don't worry and don't make my mistake. The table itself is all molded in like a nice shiny silver. I think it looks pretty good on that respect. The only part that isn't silver is this little cloth or towel that you drape over this little curved bit here at the bottom. This is a soft kind of rubbery material, but not like too soft. I think it's just pliable enough that you can get it on there without risking breaking anything. Not really worth taking it off there because it really has no other purpose other than to hang off that because it doesn't really look natural any other way because it is just kind of curved specifically to fit over that bar. For this, they have the wide base at the bottom. I'll get to the comparison with the diamond version a little later, but this is a piece that was definitely missing there. I believe this is what they hoist it up by when they raise it up for the lightning storm. So that is a nice addition to this. We have the various metal bits going through. We have a couple wheels. We have this one here in the middle, which actually does turn. We also have this little kind of crank piece here at the front, which I think will move a little back and forth. There's definitely some play with some of these ones that kind of pin through here, but it's not like a big deal. It's just that they're not restricted specifically to how wide the piece is. So you can kind of adjust these little cross beams here. But they have the various kind of curved bits, the reinforcements, this little like ball hinge thing going on. There's a main crossbar going across the center. It almost has like a tread pattern here at the end. At first I thought this might be some kind of lever. And maybe it is supposed to be in the movie, but it doesn't move here or anything. The other side is very similar, just doesn't have the towel hanging off of it. You only get one towel there. If you tilt it up, the detail on the bottom isn't particularly good looking. It's not really supposed to be viewed, from this angle, but it's not the worst either. Just some copy art material and stuff that you kind of see that you're maybe not supposed to. I do like down here where the table meets the base, there are some fake bolts in there to make it look like it's actually bolted down and everything. That's really cool. Up here on the top of the table, we have the headrest. And then you can see there are these slots and pins throughout the top of the table, and that's where we attach the restraints. There's another piece that wasn't included with the diamond version. While this isn't super hard to do, you do have to kind of have him posed in the right spot to get these to go over him. It's pretty, specific how he has to be sitting, but you can kind of work on it as you go. You have these little rounded horseshoe bits, and these go up on his arms. It's hard to assemble this on camera, so I will do it off camera, but I'm just showing as they go. So these will basically sit kind of up here, tucked in. He has another kind of flat U that goes over his upper torso, a larger one that's very similar in design that goes over his lower torso, and then kind of a squared off version of the same that will go over his legs. Then we have some flat pieces that are smaller or less wide, I guess, and these will go over his legs. So let me put this all together and we'll take another look at it. Alright, he doesn't really balance properly upright like this. I'd have to put a tape dispenser under him to kind of balance him out. But I just wanted to show you kind of the top-down view of how this all sits. So you can see these pieces are over his upper arms there. The last of these was really hard to get in because these bars are very specific on him. And really, there doesn't leave a whole lot of room under the armpit to get that peg in. So I do recommend taking your time with this because these especially feel like they could be brittle, and just kind of being patient, doing it in good lighting, all that stuff. While his arms are pinned in, you kind of lose the shoulder mobility, but you can use the elbow to kind of rotate things around. And adjust whether his arms are sitting more on the table or hanging off or anything like that. The head doesn't really matter in terms of movement because it is sitting on that cradle, so you're pretty limited, with his back against here, you're limited to where the head's going to sit. You could always rotate the head a little bit in there, I guess, but not a whole lot of variance you're going to get out of that. Obviously, we have the one across the chest, like I mentioned, the one across the lower torso or the waist, the legs with the squared off one, and then the two individual ones here on his feet. These do all just slot in there, so you can adjust how tight down they are, but there's no ratcheting or anything. I was kind of expecting a more positive connection when I put them in, but you really just put them into the slot and slide them down until they're tight across the figure. So I'm sure if I turn this upside down, he'd probably fall out at least of one of them. So I wouldn't expect this to really hold the figure in place if you were planning to do anything with that, but it holds them in there solidly enough. I don't have a ton of space to really do a good side-by-side comparison of the tables themselves, but up here is the Diamond Select one. I will state off the bat that this thing has been beat up a bit over the years, and it is missing the headrest that pegs in here, so it's not the best comparison I can make. Also, looking at it now, it looks like I assembled it backwards last time I put it together, because these bits are on the side that doesn't have the peg for the headrest. But since the headrest is missing, we're just going to turn it around and pretend that I didn't do that. So you can see there's a big difference in color right off the bat. This has a bit more of a rusty look to it, where this NECA one is very clean. The Diamond one outside of the headrest does not have room for any of the restraints. Size-wise, it's pretty similar in all respects. It's about the same height. I think it looks like it would actually sit a little higher if it had the base like NECA does. So this is roughly the same height as NECA standing on its own feet, but it also is missing that bottom piece that NECA has, so technically the legs on this one are taller on the Diamond one. If I put them end to end, it looks like for the actual table platform itself, the Diamond one is also a little bit wider. Kind of makes sense, the Diamond figure was a bit on the bulky side, but roughly very similar dimensions. And if you weren't using the restraints, you probably could get the Diamond Frankenstein's monster onto this table. I just highly doubt you'd be able to lock them down since these are so specific, but I don't have them handy to check that, so I could be wrong. It could actually fit. In terms of detailing, NECA definitely has a lot more. Some of the basic beats are here, like these curved pieces, the main struts, the little wheel in the middle, even though NECA's wheel here is much larger. That drop down, the crossbar, this interior crossbar as well. But everything on the NECA version is just much beefier, much more industrial looking. This whole little ball and curved part is completely missing from the Diamond one, as is like this little wheel over here and this cross beam down here. Diamonds is also just kind of looks like, you can almost make it out of PVC pipe, some of their internal structure, if you were making a life-size version of it, where NECA's definitely has a lot more industrial welded look. So, very similar in terms to the sarcophagus for the mummy. They took a very similar thing, it functions very similar, it's very similar in size, but this is just a much more ornate, accurate version of the piece over what Diamond had done. But there is a big time difference between the Diamond and the NECA one. And a big price difference because, the Diamond piece came with the figure, whereas this is a whole separate purchase that is more expensive than the figure itself. And while the accessory set does come with other pieces, this is still the star of the show. So I don't really anticipate anybody would buy it just for the other bits. This is really what you're paying your money for. And just for a size comparison again, I'll bring Doc Brown back in, being a kind of standard human figure from NECA. And the height of the table sits kind of just above his waist level. If you want him right up next to the table, there is room between that base and the rest of the table to actually fit a person in there. So that's kind of a plus. You could have, a doctor interacting with the monster. I just really wish we had like a Colin Clive figure to go in here, and hopefully they'll deliver that someday. Like I said, I think I'm being a little overly harsh on this set, mostly because of small details on it that just aren't exactly what I want them to be. And I do own that older table, and while this is a hell of a lot nicer than that older table, it's not as crazy to have this as it would have been if I'd never picked up that old set. So I think for people who didn't get in on the Diamond Select stuff, This is probably going to shine a lot brighter than it does for me in this case, but I still do think it is a cool accessory kit. Like I said, it's really all about the table. I guess I would argue maybe the table and that head sculpt, because the head sculpt is a nice add-on to it. And one plus side for me is I actually have a second Frankenstein's monster figure that had a bad leg that I forgot to return, so I could actually put that one on the table permanently where he doesn't have to articulate it all, and have one that's posable and free, and then have one that lives on the table. Probably won't be using that cloth much at all because it just doesn't look good to me, and probably won't be using the background much either, but it is a nice little set and I will recommend it. That being said, I am really looking forward to the next accessory set because the next one is Dracula, and that is stuff that Diamond did not give us. Honestly, Diamond didn't even give us a Bela Lugosi Dracula, so everything to do with Dracula we've got coming from NECA has me very excited because it is really uncharted territory in this scale figure since pretty much Sideshow did them, and that was a long time ago. And I never got that too, so I don't have that comparison to make. It'll all be totally fresh for me, and maybe I could be a little less of a jaded jerk reviewing it. But yeah, that'll be it for this one. I'll see you guys next time. Later.